It's a big issue for him. I think, as you know, in the early 2000s, he's giving money to Republicans. And he even went at the Democratic National Convention in 2008 and said he believed his fight was for the soul of the Republican Party, not necessarily the soul of the Democratic Party. He felt that that's what, it was an issue, and he has exercised his free speech rights in a way that has come to the tune of millions of dollars and activated a donor list that now tries to flip chambers all over the country, legislative chambers, and to work to take down anti-gay candidates, largely Republicans, but he will support some Republicans
in New York State.
In New York State, I mean, this is his issue, and he's inclined to do what it takes from an individual standpoint, a monetary standpoint, and a policy standpoint to make sure that he achieves what he wants.
How much was the takeover of the left here in Colorado a reaction to social conservatives? Was Tim Gill being angry at social conservatives, and therefore he decided to open up his
That's what motivated him. I think that was what motivated him. There's an anecdote in that in the book where he goes to the State House. He's given a lot of money, mostly to foundations, but never really been involved in a big way in the political sphere. And he goes to the State House. There's a bill pending there that would outlaw the mention of homosexuality in a classroom, except in the context of sexually transmitted diseases. It was the first time he'd ever been to the Capitol to watch a bill. He sat in the back.
That's a pretty scary thing right there.
He sat in the back of the room. He watched the hearing. And as he was walking out the door, he passed Alice Madden, at the time a Democrat member of the minority party, and he said, "Somebody's got to go." And that's what got him started. So he was very motivated by one piece of legislation in particular, but I think there were a lot of things that led him up to that point.
And if you ask the Democrats, they would tell you that the phrase that they issued a lot on the campaign trail was God's, guns, and gays. That's what the Republicans, they would argue, were talking about then. They weren't discussing issues like economic development, taxes, education, infrastructure, roads, healthcare, and so that's what they felt like the Republican Party wasn't addressing the issues that mattered most.
I've joked with you before, Caldara's political axiom number one: there is nothing Republicans can't F up, and I believe this to be true, but. Have Republicans learned? Have you seen? I mean, this, and you've done it in great detail. Has Republicans learned that they're playing by the old playbook? There's a brand new playbook going on where you invest not just in candidates, but in long-term capacities. Are we getting it? You're the outsider.
I would say let's look at kind of the primaries that are going on right now on the Republican side. They're continuing to be divisive, and it's not just at the top levels of the ticket; it's all the way down. This, and you and I were talking before we started this. In many ways, this comes down to how badly does your side want to win, because you know how badly the other folks want to win. They've committed to it so much so that they've won, and they've set aside natural policy differences. They've set aside egos, and they've said, and fundamentally, it comes down to, and Norma Anderson, the former Senate Majority Leader, told us Republicans have forgotten this is a game of addition and not subtraction. And to a certain extent, that's what's happened, is that if you beat each other up so much in primaries, by the time you get to the general election, your candidate is a flawed candidate.
How was it that Ritter was able to go without a candidate running against him in the primary? Here is a pro-life Democrat, and he runs unopposed for the Democratic nomination 4 years ago. That's completely unheard of.
Well, there is an anecdote that captures better than anything else the discipline on the Democratic side during that time period. That a pro-life prosecutor could get the nomination for the Democratic Party unopposed.
Whereas, I mean, any Democrat who was pro-choice would have been able to knock him off, in my estimation, in that primary, I would think.
They work that out behind closed doors. I mean, that was something that was dealt with not in the public eye. And on the Republican side, we tend to have great battles right out there in public, and people tend to walk away after the primary with anger and bitterness, and whoever's lucky enough or unlucky enough to win the primary very often finds themselves leading a divided party into November, and it's that weakness that gives another opportunity to the Democrats.
And if you think about it, John, I mean, what happened starting in 2004, there were people who voted for President Bush at the top of the ticket. 6 of the House districts that the state Dems won voted for President Bush. So people were going and they're like, okay, Republican at the top of the ticket. Maybe they voted for Pete Coors. Maybe they voted for Ken Salazar. Something moved them to switch when they got down to their state house candidate, we would assert, and we articulate in the book, that it was a focused, intense campaign to actually raise the name ID of their candidates and to necessarily kind of take them out of the policy letter after their name concept. It was no longer about R&D, it was about who's going to solve your problems. But in many ways, if you think about it, they've gotten people to understand that people in the state aren't voting straight party tickets anymore.
They're voting particular issues, particular candidates, and we now live in a world of micro-targeting, which is you can't just put out a single ad on Channel 9 to pay for your family, but you have to now figure out exactly what one person wants and give it to that one person, change the message and give it to that person. I've only got a few minutes left here. When you look over the last 3 elections here and how a strongly conservative state is now a beacon for liberalism. I mean, it is amazing to think, that 90%, let's say we've got 9 federal delegates, only 2 of them voted against Obamacare, all the rest voted for it. I will guarantee you 7 out of 9 Coloradans do not support Obamacare, but yet our representation says that's what we do. How did we get there? What's the takeaway from this? What is it that the average citizen will learn after they read the blueprint?
Well, the progressives in the state, the Democrats in the state, built a better political mousetrap. And the Republicans didn't learn quickly enough to match it. And every year, the Democrats would up their level of their game and continue to keep the expansion of their power going. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. And this is a national story. This is people in Washington and have really taken notice. It's been written up in the Washington Post, Time Magazine, Atlantic, that what happened in Colorado is really a blueprint for a transformation of a state. That what happened here is remarkable. In fact, it's being exported to other states. And in the 2010 election cycle, this model, this structure, is being actively seeded in many other places, including places where there are traditionally safe Republican seats. Now, this is not going to be the best year for Republicans, but if this
or for Democrats.
Or, I'm sorry, for Democrats. But if this blueprint is anything, it's a levee that would withstand the low points of the political cycle, so kind of minimize losses in bad times and maximize gains in good times.
And these guys are not going away. This system is not going away.
No,
and that's my
it's the future of politics.
Yeah, and that's my takeaway from this whole thing as a reporter, why I got in this. My job is supposed to educate voters about what's going on in their campaigns, and what's going to happen is happening already, and what will happen more in the future is that a lot of this money is going underground. And so you're just simply not going to be able to figure out who's influencing whom. Who's paying for that 30-second ad that takes care of my family, and I thank them for it. And yet at the same time, I can't educate. I can't tell people. And as a campaign, you lose control of your message. As a political party, they're in many ways irrelevant now. And as overall to voters, you should be extremely concerned. Not just, I'm not concerned about the amount of money that's coming in, but just where it's coming from. You cannot find out, in light of the fact that many of these infrastructures that they've set up are legal and yet hidden.
The game has changed. The rules have changed. You can learn about it in the blueprint. This is a worthwhile book. Liberals, Republicans, doesn't matter. Read this. If you thought you knew how politics works, you didn't until you finished this book. Adam, Rob, thank you. Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Bamboozle, nuka, noozle, bippity, bop, she-gall. You jibber jab, bamboozle, nuka, noozle, bippity, bop, she-gall. I mean, you keep on talking, but you don't know where to turn it off.